The reality is that science has overwhelmingly told us for years that we are facing a climate change crisis, but we're also facing a biodiversity crisis. We've got 1 million species on the brink, and we have to respond. But one of the things that we can't allow is the industrialization and the endangerment of a region that is recognized globally as one of the iconic biodiversity hotspots anywhere.
Welcome to Facing Future TV. I am your host, Raya Salter. I'm here today with Joel Reynolds. Joel is a senior attorney at the Natural Resources Defense Council and the founding director of its Marine Mammal Protection Project. For decades, he's worked to protect whales and other marine life from industrial development and ocean noise through litigation and international conservation efforts. Welcome, Joel.
Thanks so much. Pleasure to be here.
You're so very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And what we're going to talk about is really an incredible situation. The Gulf of California, the Sea of Cortez, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most biodiverse marine ecosystems on Earth. What's being proposed is to turn that protected sanctuary into a LNG, liquefied natural gas, export corridor. Pipelines from Texas, liquefaction terminals, and supertankers moving through the whale habitat. This isn't just a local issue, it's a biodiversity crisis and a climate lock-in decision at the same time. It's been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2005. 39% of all marine mammal species are found there. This is an incredible, fast-moving situation, and we are here with Joel, who is one of the leading attorneys who is fighting through the legal system to fight this incredible project. So welcome so much, Joel. Please, Joel, tell us a little bit about this effort and what's at stake.
Sure. Well, you've done a good job in setting the geographic landscape for the entire discussion. What sets this apart from a lot of the projects that are concerning people today with respect to climate change or biodiversity loss is that this is one of the iconic hotspots anywhere in the world. You mentioned that it's a United Nations World Heritage Site designated by UNESCO. It's a biosphere reserve, migratory bird sanctuary. It's protected in layers. It's one of these places that has been recognized repeatedly, most recently, I would say, by the World Conservation Congress that met in October and approved overwhelmingly a resolution opposing liquefied natural gas development in the Sea of Cortez, Gulf of California, the aquarium of the world. Pick your name. But this is one of these iconic places remaining on the planet where nature thrives and nature deserves to be protected from encroaching industrialization, encroaching inconsistent development, encroachment as here by the fossil fuel industry.
It really, it's diabolical. Can you tell us a bit more? I'm interested to know more about some of these species that are here, about these whales, and what do we stand to lose if we lose these magnificent creatures?
Yeah, I think anybody who has been to the Gulf of California can testify to just how extraordinary it is. I was there last May, and we saw giant manta rays, California sea lions, an incredible diversity of fish and birds, 8 species of great whales that include blues, fins, sperms, British, gray, orcas. I mean, it's remarkable in this small ocean to encounter all of these incredible species of whales. It's a birthing lagoon for the largest animals known to exist on the planet, blue whales. And then there are 5 of 8 species of marine turtles, including the largest, leatherbacks, which are about 2,000 pounds. They're living dinosaurs. Then there are 891 species of fish. There are millions of seabirds that stop here. Among the fish, the most famous one is the whale shark, which is the largest fish on the planet. So you've got the largest whale, you've got the largest marine turtle, you've got the largest fish. I mean, it's really extraordinary to have all of this in one place. And unfortunately, it's at risk of becoming a sacrifice zone for the industry that's killing the planet, which is the fossil fuel industry.
I say, like, this is so moving because you're mentioning the species, just to even hear these species mentioned. My normal reaction is joy, wonder, and I mean, we're lucky to even get a peek at these species, even on film. I mean, I used to live in Hawaii, and we would take the boats out to even try and get a peek at some of these magnificent creatures, and we're talking about endangering them and pushing them towards extinction. And it's disturbing to even to hear these creatures named in this context when normally what we should all be thinking is just wonder and joy. Sorry, I'm getting emotional listening to you describe this.
Yeah, no, it's an incredibly compelling story, and we hear a lot about the climate crisis. It's become more and more evident with every passing year, and there's no disputing it really, unless you're somebody who is immune to science and immune to facts. And unfortunately, we are confronted every single day by the fact that our leadership in this country is one of those people. But the reality is that science has overwhelmingly told us for years that we are facing a climate change crisis. It's not something that's just in the future. It's already here. It's only going to get worse. But we're also facing a biodiversity crisis. We've got 1 million species on the brink, according to the best science. And, we have to respond. But one of the things that we can't allow is the industrialization and the endangerment of a region that is recognized globally as one of the iconic biodiversity hotspots anywhere. That's what this campaign is about, but it's truly an existential decision that we're facing here about whether we're going to protect nature at its best or we're going to turn it over to the care of the industry that wants to industrialize it. I don't think there's any question what the answer to
Should
that
be
would be.
to any moral person. Well, let's actually get into this. Can you tell us about this plan to industrialize for the sake of fossil fuels? Who's behind it? What's the plan? What are
Yeah.
they trying to do here?
So there are 3 principal liquefied natural gas terminals that are planned for the eastern shore of the Gulf of California. The northernmost, the largest terminal, is at a location called Puerto Libertad, proposed by an American company by the name of Mexico Pacific Limited.
Puerto Libertad, on the coastline of Sonora, Mexico, is key to unlocking a sea change in the Mexican economy and the global energy industry.
The source of the gas is also the United States. It would be piped through 650 miles of new pipeline from the Permian Basin in West Texas and eastern New Mexico. It would go through some very dangerous parts of Mexico, including ultimately its destination at Puerto Libertad, which is in Sonora State. The risks of cartel activity are enormous. theft of energy from pipelines is known to be a major problem. I think, for example, in 2023, there was something like $780 million worth of fuel stolen from Pemex pipelines by the cartels. So that's the first project. It's called Saguaro, and its developer is called Mexico Pacific. The second
Well,
project,
I have to. That was that was a bombshell. I'm not familiar with this. Clearly, I need to be familiar with this 780 million. Like, what is the significance of this criminality around, it's sort of compounding, there's this business interest and there's this criminality. I can only imagine it's corruption. What is going on here?
yeah, well, that's the cartels. Where there's money to be made, the cartels typically are there. In certain regions of Mexico, this is known to exist. It's a undeniable danger. It's not a place that our Mexican partners feel comfortable even having us visit because they say it's simply not safe. And many of them don't feel safe in these areas either. But Sonora is one of the states. Sinaloa is one of the states. And I'll just mention the second liquefied natural gas terminal, which would be located in Topolobampo, Sinaloa. This is further south in the Gulf, across from La Paz and Loreto on the western shores. These are very well-known tourist destinations. But Sinaloa has a reputation for cartel activity as well. But anyway, the project there is called Vista Pacifico LNG, and it is owned by Sempra, which is based in San Diego, a California utility and major corporation. And it is proposing to build the second of the liquefied natural gas terminals. The third would also be located in Sonora State at Guaymas, so it's in between the two terminals I've already mentioned, about halfway up the Gulf. And it is owned by a Texas company called Epsilon and a Singapore company called LNG Alliance. And these are the three projects that collectively comprise a wave of fossil fuel industrialization in the Gulf, the likes of which has never been allowed by the Mexican government, never been seen before. And if we have anything to say about it, won't succeed here either. But that is the current situation. Each of these projects is under environmental review by the Mexican government. There have been something like 10 lawsuits filed so far in Mexico against the first of the projects, the largest, which is Saguaro. Some of the lawsuits have been filed by adjoining landowners, some by two of the leading environmental law firms in Mexico. So there's significant opposition, but those are the three projects, and each of them has a pipeline that would need to be constructed to deliver natural gas in gas form to the terminals, which would then be converted into liquefied natural gas, which is super cooled, and then loaded onto gigantic liquefied natural gas tankers, each of which is about 300 meters in length. That is 3 football fields in length, over 900 feet, for transit through the Gulf, across the Pacific Ocean, ultimately to be offloaded in Asia.
So these markets are ultimately in Asia. And help me understand what the impacts of this industrialization. So I'm thinking about the extraction, I'm thinking about the processing happening on shore, then loading onto these major tankers with at least three major companies seeking to really industrialize this area. What does that look like in terms of traffic and impacts, including when it gets to Asia?
Just imagine what major industry looks like. It's not something any of us would ever aspire to live anywhere near. These are magnets for all kinds of things that are associated with industrial activity, and that is, major truck traffic, major air pollution sources, water contamination, invasive species, toxics, pollution, basically turning what is now a region of very significant natural landscapes into industrial hellscapes. So ultimately, this scheme would turn the Sea of Cortez into a shipping channel, into a gas station, into a sacrifice zone for the production and transport and delivery of liquefied natural gas to Asian countries. Now, we can talk about which countries, if indeed there are any countries at this point in time that have signed up for this, but it's a new chapter in the evolution of climate change caused by fossil fuel dependence.
What, and it makes me wonder, like, why now? You talked about how this is, the government in Mexico is approving this now, and it hasn't previously been decided. Is it just part of the kind of backlash and moving away from climate commitments, in the name of energy security? Is it the ascendance of the fossil fuel industry or something else? Why now with this project?
Yeah. Well, let me be clear. The Mexican government hasn't approved these projects. There was an approval in 2018 for the Saguaro project based on completely inadequate environmental assessment, largely written in 2006, when the project wasn't even a liquefaction terminal, it was a regasification terminal. Very different environmental effects, and that's the focus of litigation. But, Mexico elected a new president last year, and we had a presidential election too, and I think it's fair to say that Mexico did a much better job than we did. They elected the first female president. She's a PhD scientist. She's got a fair amount of background, climate change, climate science. And so we have high hopes for how she and her administration will respond to this. But there's absolutely no way to be certain about where they will end up. And that's why it's so critical that opposition be pursued. And that's the reason why there is a robust coalition of opposition in Mexico. NRDC is part of an international coalition that's growing to support that opposition. You can't take anything for granted. The reality is that geopolitics is a very difficult discipline. And particularly these days, when we have in the United States a president for whom anything that has to do with fossil fuels is a good thing, and any discussion of climate change is a hoax. So that's kind of what we're up against in this country, and I think the government of Mexico is going to be dealing with that as well. There are a lot of very complicated issues between the United States and Mexico these days. This isn't one of the top tier issues, but it easily could become part of the discussions. Mexico depends on natural gas from the United States for about 50% of its energy generation. 70% of its natural gas comes from the United States. It's a real problem of energy and insecurity for Mexico because they are so much under the thumb of the United States, whether it's for political reasons or whether there's some problem of weather that prevents the delivery of natural gas across the border. I mean, it could be any number of things. And so further expansion of their natural gas dependence on the United States is really a questionable direction for Mexico to go in. And this is a point that obviously is very much emphasized within Mexico itself.
Go ahead and share with me. You mentioned what the NRDC is doing. You mentioned these coalitions. how is this fight shaping up, and where does it stand now in terms of the lawsuits and the legal issues?
Yeah. So there are the lawsuits themselves are ongoing. They're pending in Mexico. They've all been consolidated, and there is an injunction against the construction of the Saguaro project as a result of that litigation. There are administrative proceedings that are in process with respect to all three of the projects in Mexico. So I feel very good about the level of formal use of the courts in Mexico to try and deter this whole scheme. In the United States, there are also permit proceedings that are ongoing in front of the Department of Energy. Mexico Pacific got to the end of its initial export permit without making any progress on the ground in terms of construction and necessary delivery of gas under the time restrictions of the permit. So that permit expired, and they've now applied for a new one. A number of groups, including NRDC, have opposed that formally, and it's now pending in front of the Department of Energy for a decision. If that extension is granted, it would be a 7-year extension until 2032. That's what's been requested in any case. And we've argued that the extension should be denied. If it's granted, it's likely to end up in federal court, and that could take some time as well. So there's a pretty robust legal opposition. In addition, we have engaged with the financial backers of some of these projects because, let's face it, you can't build them without investors. And JP Morgan Chase is probably the biggest funder of fossil fuel projects on earth among any of the banks, and they are a financial advisor to Mexico Pacific in support of the Saguaro project. Two other banks also are financial advisors. One is Mitsubishi's bank, MUFG, and the other is Santander, which is a Spanish bank. And all of these companies have been highlighted publicly and will be exposed to increasing reputational and financial risk as these projects continue. And that's a very important part of the opposition. One of the main areas of attention is raising the profile, both of what's at risk in the Gulf and also what the threat is. Because while these are relatively well-known projects in Mexico, they are very much anonymous internationally. And I always say that silence is the best friend of a bad idea or a bad project. And that's one of our priorities here, is to raise the profile so people actually know what's going on and can get involved.
Actually, that I know that there are several to that end, and you're exactly right. We need to. I don't think a lot of folks broadly know about this. I'm so glad that you're talking to us about this now, and I hope the word continues to get out. I know that there are some narrative strategies behind this. There's a film that just premiered at Sundance. There's a second film that addresses this issue. Tell me a little bit about what's going on there.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that because both of the films are directly relevant to this latest campaign against liquefied natural gas development in the Sea of Cortez. The first is called Way of the Whale, and it's a film that describes a campaign that NRDC was involved in, that I was co-director of back in the 1990s at a place called Laguna San Ignacio, also in Baja, but on the Pacific coast, about 500 miles south of San Diego. It's a World Heritage Site, it's a biosphere reserve, it's a whale sanctuary, a migratory bird sanctuary, and the last place on Earth where gray whales can breed and calve undisturbed by human intrusion. It's a natural gem. And in the mid-90s, Mexico and Mitsubishi formed a joint venture to build the world's largest industrial salt works on the shores of this natural gem. So in other words, to surround it with 116 square miles of industrial development. So we took it on. We were told the chances of defeating it were almost nil because the Mexican government was part of the joint venture. Mitsubishi was one of the largest corporations in the world. But we took it on, and the movie describes some of what we did that over a period of 5 years ended up persuading the president of Mexico to abandon the project. This film is all about that, as well as the journey of a young Mexican climate activist along with the gray whale from Baja all the way to the Arctic.
I truly feel that I see the world differently now, after my encounter with a gray whale.
Como que las ballenas vinieron a decirnos que nos acordáramos de ellas.
We know Zia Bastida. She's been on interviews on this channel before.
Okay, good. Yeah, she's a phenomenal spokesperson and just tremendous. I mean, as they say, the camera loves her. And
Yeah.
she's a very, very articulate spokesperson and the star of this film. But she's also increasingly getting involved in opposition to the liquefied natural gas scheme in the Gulf of California. So that's a film that is scheduled for its premiere in Mexico City in the middle of April, and it's already been showing at film festivals. I know it's showing at the Washington, D.C. Environmental Film Festival at the end of March.
Okay, so not specifically about this project, but a blueprint of how we can win on this issue, and similar in terms of what the threat is for this particular case you're working on. Is that fair to say?
It has a lot of lessons for what we need to do in response to the current challenge. It's different because the industry is different and the times are different, but the biodiversity is very, very similar, and what's at stake is very similar. It's one of these existential choices for society again. Now, the second film, which I'll just mention very briefly, is called The Last Dive. Its focus is the population of giant manta rays that are found in the Gulf of California. They're absolutely magnificent, very, very intelligent creatures. They were overfished and brutally assaulted for years and years, but now they're coming back. And this film is all about that. So both of these films have been wonderful leverage points for panel discussions about not just what the subject of the films would be, but also about how both are relevant to the defense of the Gulf of California today.
Well, I hope everybody goes to see them, and we will share out information about those for sure. I wanted to dig in a little bit to the climate implications here. I mean, it's frustrating because they want to chase this dollar for LNG. We have renewable alternatives. There are other ways that we could go other than this. The diabolical is just the word that comes up again and again. This diabolical plot to industrialize, our most sacred natural places. And burning these fossil fuels is accelerating the climate crisis. I mean, what is the scale of this industrialization, probably, and other industrializations in it? What is the threat to the climate?
Yeah, it's real. Liquefied natural gas is the next chapter in the accelerating tragedy of climate change. It's where the industry wants to go because they want to be able to deliver fossil fuel to new markets, in this particular case, to Asia, where they're hoping that countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, Pakistan will build the infrastructure, billions and billions of dollars required to build this infrastructure that once it's built requires decades of use. Otherwise, it becomes a stranded asset. And so if they can hook these countries onto this new energy generation source that's delivered by ships from anywhere in the world, they will be continuing this very, very dangerous activity. Really, that's what it is, for decades. They're hoping also that they could sell it to China and India. But interestingly enough, both of those countries are investing heavily in renewable energy rather than replacing coal, as the industry has told us they would do, with liquefied natural gas. With natural gas, it's not happening. And as coal decreases, natural gas remains the same or goes down, where the trend lines for renewable energy are going up very steeply. And so for all the attacks on renewable energy that we're seeing under the current administration in the United States, major countries across the globe are betting on renewable energy. And I'm telling you, those countries are going to eat our lunch, because if we continue to elevate fossil fuels, we're just securing our own doom, both economically and environmentally.
Yeah, and it shows how the fossil fuel and the biodiversity issues, this are completely interlinked. And it also, my understanding of one of the postures of these cases, I think that permit extension has to do with the fact that this company hasn't been able to competently get the project together. You mentioned the cartels and the corruption, the fact that these companies may or may not even be able to deliver these financial promises for a host of reasons, be it technology they're being overly optimistic about, be it their own operational competence, which it seems like here they don't have. And it could also increase the danger of these projects. What's going on here with am I right, the posture in terms of this permit extension? Like, they can't get it together. Yet.
Right. So you're talking about the Saguaro project,
Okay.
the one up at Puerto Libertad, and the company is Mexico Pacific. If you go back to December 2024, they were well funded. They were promising that they were going to reach what's called a final investment decision in the first quarter of 2025. They had solid leadership. They had investment by major companies. Anyway, NRDC got in December of 2024 and immediately began writing to not only to Mexico Pacific, but to their major funders. Quantum Capital Group was one of them, which owned 90% of the company. And we wrote them as well. We wrote to JP Morgan Chase and expressed our concerns in some detail and our opposition. And little by little, the Saguaro project began to come apart. Quantum Capital Group sold backed away in March of 2025. In April of 2025, their CEO took another job with another company. Mexico Pacific began to lay people off in Houston and Singapore and move their operations to Mexico City, hoping to get an ally in the Mexican government. They did not get a $100 million loan they were hoping to get from the Export-Import Bank in May. They began to try and renegotiate contracts. I mean, it's just an amazing disruption in their business plan. And needless to say, they didn't reach a final investment decision in 2025 at all. In fact, their permit expired in December. And so that is what necessitated the extension application, and that's what we're now filing. So I think we feel very good about our progress against Saguaro in 2025, but I don't want anybody to think that the ball game is over. It's not. These companies have a way of surviving all kinds of ups and downs. The thing about liquefied natural gas is it's an extremely volatile energy source financially, and it just goes up, it goes down. So having confidence in it as a long-term investment is very, very difficult. And this, of course, contrasts sharply with renewable energy, for which all of the trend lines globally are going up, except in the United States. And so, we have to deal with that. But the fact of the matter is that in terms of Mexico, Pacific, and Saguaro, we made a lot of progress last year.
Okay, say I'm delighted to hear that it's, it is their own incompetence, but also impact from advocacy that is helping this fall apart, which I can't help but see is a good thing. And you're so right about this addiction to fossil fuels. I know in the Northeast, our utility bills have been skyrocketing, and it's in large part because of our dependence, our addiction to this volatile gas that we cannot geopolitically count on. And I get that we're not out of the woods with these projects at all, but it feels good to know that the advocacy does matter. And so now that we're nearing the end of our time, what are some of the things that folks can do? Like, how can folks get involved and learn more? And, what should we be focusing on this fight going forward?
So first, let me just say that there are many pieces to the opposition, and none is more important than the robust coalition that exists in Mexico. People have been fighting this scheme not just for years, but for decades in Mexico. And they are at the heart of the success that has prevented the actual construction of any of these projects so far. And they will continue to be at the heart of the opposition. And so organizations like mine, NRDC, are determined to do everything we can to support them. So I would say for your viewers, the first thing is to get educated, and watching this conversation is a good start, because if you hadn't heard about it before, you've heard about it now. And it's important for people to elevate the existence of this particular campaign in their networks, in their families, with their friends, in their daily lives, in whatever way they can. When people ask me, well, what can we do to fight back these days? The first thing I always say is you have to vote. And you have to vote for people who care about the environment. And that's essential. But it's also important to join organizations that are actively involved in the battles that you care about. And if you care about this battle, there are a number of organizations like NRDC that are committed to winning. And, there's an old saying in the nonprofit world, which is no money, no mission. And it's as simple as that. It takes financial resources to carry on these fights. And so I would always encourage people to look at the organizations that are doing the work you care about, and then help them do that work.
All right. Well, I think
the last thing I'll say, Ryan, is just we have activism alerts periodically, and we depend on our members and our activists to respond. People say, well, what difference does it make if I sign a petition? Well, collectively, it makes a great deal of difference. And we use them in many strategic ways to exert pressure on the targets of our campaigns. And this campaign for the Gulf of California is no exception to that.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for this work and being a champion for biodiversity and for climate action. I have been deeply moved and educated through this conversation about this unbelievable issue. It's, the way you hear, folks are saying things out loud, big lies, big crazy things, because it's almost it's easier to hear, you can say this big lie and people somehow believe it. That people are saying out loud with their full chest, we're going to destroy this area for the sake of outdated fossil fuels that are destroying our planet is outrageous. It's almost unbelievable. It's Orwellian that this is what's happening in this time.
So, I mean, there are so many things every single day that are Orwellian.
That's also true.
Disdain for science, or even for basic facts, is unprecedented. I'm an old guy. I've been around a long time, and I've never seen anything like this. So we have to fight back. I always say to people, it's hard to identify anything that future generations will care more about in terms of what we do for them today than fighting for clean air and clean water and stable climate and robust diversity and cities where children could grow up without exposure to toxics. That's what this is about.
That's what this is about.
And that's why I've chosen, to do what I do for my entire career of 45 years or whatever it is now.
Well, all I can say is thank you. I agree 100%. So glad that you came to talk about this. I hope everybody who's watching takes up these issues, supports this cause, and shares this information. So thank you so much, Joel, for everything you're doing on this issue. And
Brian, thank you very much for the invitation.
From ancient times our home, the seven seas we'd roam, asking nothing more than life. Then man came to reap a prize not his to keep. Our lives a harvest in his hands. Hide my face in the deepest place, for I am last of my race. I am the last.